Hi, thanks for watching. Okay, in this video, I do want to talk more about what I would call natural magical states. Magical states. I, maybe I'm wrong, but I do suspect that maybe the weakness that we see in cluster B disorders is probably fundamentally a weakness in the area of processing natural magical states. Um, Too easily a weakness where we're too easily captured. We too easily fall completely into spellbound states, and basically we're weak. Because in a world of magic, the test is who does not fall completely absorbed in the magic. You know what I mean? Like in a world full of charms and attractions and powers, and when I say powers, I mean like attractive people who are attractive, people who have a lot of status, people who are intimidating. These are natural magical powers, and some people fall more into you know, into the spell than other people do. You know, I was giving another example in the last video that I grew up in the South, and I know there's kind of a charm to the accent. Um, Southern accents, the Southern style, and whatever. It depends on which part of the South, but you could see how some people really fall into it, and they're so charmed by it. Even Southerners who really their accent is more exaggerated than others. So I always noticed that as a child growing up in South Carolina, how some people had more of an accent than others, and you could almost tell that they were kind of like, sort of spellbound by the charm of it, and they really wanted to be super Southern, and they could all be natives of the same city, and they're all just as Southern, but some kind of exaggerated it more. And it also seemed to me that as we got into the 80s and 90s, people started really exaggerating their accents more than what I remembered from when I was much younger. So it's kind of interesting. Um, and there's lots of other examples, like say if you're working in an industry or a corporation, some people really drink the Kool-Aid of the company, and they kind of like become sort of like the company, the way the company wants you to be, or they fall into the company culture, or just crazy stuff, or like fashion. Some people really fall into the fashion, like say how people change the way of speaking in different times in history. And some people really fall into like the popular, kind of rhythms and tones you know, of their generation, And I think these are all examples of how we fall into being kind of captivated by the charm, by the fascination, the allure of things that have power, and I think that's a magical operation. That's a magical dynamic. And so I think some people are very susceptible, and they really fall spellbound into these things, Or another example, attractive, sexual attraction, If somebody is sexually attractive in just the right way, where it hits right your weakness, it hits your weakness right dead center, man, it can just take away. It does something to your brain, because you become so captivated that it really is. We have to ask ourselves, what is the function of the spell binding, the spell binding of powerful things that have power, you know? And I'm just assuming that that's just another way in the human race where we sort of sort the leaders from the followers, the people who have the power and the people who are captivated by the power. And I think it's very interesting because somebody with narcissistic personality disorder, somebody with NPD, they will assume that they have power, but that's the fantasy. That's the wonderful thing that spellbinds them. You see what I mean? I'm like, say, if I have an ideal of what I could be, the accent I could have, my appearance, my image. My charms, whatever, I have this kind of idealized thing of what I would like to be. And I sort of become spellbound into that ideal. And so even though that ideal might be an ideal of power, in reality, I'm captivated by the idea. You see what I mean? I'm captivated by the fantasy. And so really I'm a follower. I'm rendered a follower of my own fantasy. You know what I mean? Or like let's say if somebody is very, very creative, and instead of watching pornography, they can create their own own imaginary fantasy, and they could be captivated by their own fantasy. They could imagine like a perfect man or woman or whatever, perfect sexual partner, and it's like, whoa, they're captivated by what they've conjured in their own imagination, but it's captured them. And so, in a sense, really, in the end, somebody who truly has NPD, that's truly captivated by their own fantasy ideal, they are rendered a follower, even though they think of themselves as a top dog or a leader. You know what I mean? So I think that for me, these dynamics are best described as magical states. This is natural magic. This is the natural magic that we see all over the world, in power, status. When people have, let's say, excellent magical, like a way of speaking, like some people have rhetorical gifts, like some lawyers or some politicians, they can spellbind people with the way they speak, very convincing. And so there's a lot of ways that people can be magical and people can have power. And so what happens is we start sorting in the human race between those who have a lot of power or relative power and those who fall spellbound into these things. Now, of course, the NPD may not directly fall directly always under anybody, a given person's power. Let's say some NPD has a boss who's very, very powerful. The NPD might kind of resist, falling into their spells, but the NPD is caught in his own spell. You see what I mean? So in the end, some people are just more susceptible to being spellbound, to being captured by spells, and other people are sort of like not so susceptible. And if they themselves have certain power, you can see how the human race sort of gets sorted into, who's more of a leader, who's more of a follower. And so, I don't really have any special purpose in describing this magical, landscape, except that I do believe that the more we take the mystery out of anything, including a personality disorder, the more the mystery goes down, the more we sort of can overcome the problem. You know what I mean? To some extent. I mean, we're all, even I can say, like, I'm very susceptible to spells. So I'm never going to be like a top dog in the magical world. But I think the more you take the mystery out of it, the more we sort of reclaim a certain amount of autonomy that's really lost when we really don't understand. So I think we really have to take the mystery out of these things. And even if we don't recover, all of our autonomy, we may still be weak in that area, but just demystifying it and understanding it can really at least reclaim for us, some measure of autonomy, which I think is very important. So in any case, basically, I just want to basically in this video, basically my point is that I think we should not be afraid to open ourselves to the reality of the real magical dynamics that go on between people. How people have, let's say, magical power in the sense of being attractive, being, let's say, having rhetorical gifts, being very, having the gift of speech, or maybe status, when people have real status, in the world. These things are very, very powerful because people really respond. These have influence. Okay, so basically, if we wanted to define magic, like natural magic, and I'm not into any kind of witchcraft or like supernatural. To me, that's just, I don't even find that interesting. But I do think the actual magic of the world, where anything that has influence. Okay, and so we just think, what has influence? Status, attractiveness, a gift of speech, or let's say genius, like say somebody who's very talented at painting or whatever, art, a musician, let's say, or maybe somebody who's just has good fashion sense, or just is, whatever. These are all just little ways in which people can have power and have influence. And then the question is, where there is influence, how are people influenced? How does the influence actually, affect people? And some people are more immune to influence, and some people are very contagious for influence. It's like a contagion. And so basically, I think that if a person has cluster B, I think it's important, or if say if you have a loved one or someone close to you who has cluster B, it's important for all of us, those who have cluster B and those who are close to cluster B, to understand that this may fundamentally be a weakness in the parts of the mind that process the magical aspects of life. You know what I mean? Let's say the areas of influence. We're very easily influenced. And even if we're very good at blocking, being influenced by certain things, like say a good NPD can block being influenced by, other people, maybe. Um, except for like except for like even a narcissist who like blocks influence from other people, there's still going to be a few people that really influence them, where probably the people that they end up copying in life, people that really, you know, the top dogs, I guess. But, if in our own, for those of us who do have cluster B and for those of us who have cluster B, in our lives, people close to us in our lives that have cluster B, I think it's very important to understand that fundamentally cluster B may be a real weakness in the area of natural magic, magical dynamics. And I think, as far as I'm concerned, I kind of have an idea that maybe people who already have, let's say, an overactive amygdala, maybe different levels of activity in the amygdala, or the part of our brains that sense either danger or excitement. You know, when things get very exciting, very dangerous, very critical, very heightened, like a heightened state of arousal or attraction or whatever. I think that people who are more susceptible to getting more aroused, okay, um, I think those people, their experience of life is more magical, and I think they're more easily captured by magical influences. So basically, you know, I just think that it makes sense for us to at least be open-minded and to explore and to demystify, first of all, the reality that we do live in a magic world. Humans are very magic. Humans are just, we're basically influencers, or we're influenced, you know what I mean? So influence is very important in the human world. And I think even, every human influences themselves, when we start entertaining fantasies of like, oh my God, I could be having a heart attack, or oh my God, you know, I could be in danger, or whatever. We put spells on ourselves. We influence ourselves, you know? And so, one could say that maybe the mental patterns of cluster B personality disorders are really maybe getting too absorbed in things that are influencing and getting too influenced, either by fantasies, or let's say, in the case of like someone with ASPD, antisocial, maybe just the excitement of just wanting to do something. You know what I mean? Just too easily influenced by the excitement of wanting to do something, and when we get that influence, we get kind of spellbound, and then just all the other peripheral concerns just kind of evaporate, and we just get like, it's almost like a trance. We just get captured by whatever is the thing in the moment, and then all of our faculties of deliberation and just kind of premeditation, they just kind of evaporate. So in my opinion, you know I think cluster Bs are conditions of reduced capacity. I really do. Even if you can think, and even if you do have intelligence in a cluster B state, especially if you're activated, I do think that the spellbound dynamic, the fact of being kind of spellbound, that does significantly reduce the peripheral awareness that normally moderates behavior. So there's a reason why cluster Bs have such behavior problems, and it's not just because we have a bad attitude or we just need to concentrate more. It's because there really is a reduced capacity, because in the magical world, I think we're just a little too captivated. And I think being captivated really is kind of involves a reduction in basically, being able to mediate and premeditate, and just to kind of think on the periphery, you know what I mean? To just have a little more executive awareness. So thanks for watching.